Chosen one. You unknowingly triggered a protocol only used for 3 people in history. Stop everything because something has already happened, and you haven't caught the scent of it yet. Weeks ago, maybe months, maybe years, you activated a sequence no manual could predict, a protocol buried so deep that reality itself had to pause and recalculate. Right now, alarms are screaming in places you'll never see. What you did seemed normal at the time, maybe a conversation where you knew something impossible, a decision that defied probability, surviving what should have destroyed you. That's how the most powerful transformations work. They never announce themselves. They just happen, and reality has to scramble to accommodate what you've become. The first sign wasn't something you noticed. It was something others noticed about you without being able to explain it. People started treating you differently. Not obviously, not dramatically, but there's been a shift in the way certain individuals respond to your presence. Some seem inexplicably drawn to you now, like moths to a flame they can't name. Others seem almost afraid, backing away from interactions they would have pursued before. You've become radioactive in the most fascinating way possible. Have you noticed how certain conversations die when you enter them? Not because people don't want to talk to you, but because your presence changes the frequency of what's being discussed. Have you noticed how some people stare at you just a fraction too long, like they're trying to decode something written on your face in a language they've forgotten how to read? Let me tell you about the 3 others, though I can't tell you their names because names become meaningless at this level of existence. The first one triggered the protocol centuries ago by accidentally discovering something about time that wasn't supposed to be understood for another millennium. A simple craftsperson, obsessed with precision, working alone in a workshop that smelled of oil and metal. Then suddenly this person understood something about the relationship between consciousness and temporal flow that broke every rule the universe thought was unbreakable. No fame followed. No manifestos were written. Work simply continued. But every creation after that moment contained a subtle wrongness that only certain people could feel. A wrongness that suggested time itself might be optional. The second activation came from a child who asked a question that shouldn't have been possible to formulate given the information available at that time. It wasn't complex, it wasn't even particularly interesting to most people who heard it, but it demonstrated a kind of thinking that suggested operation outside the normal constraints of human cognition. The protocol activated because the question itself was proof that consciousness could evolve in directions that weren't accounted for in the original design. That child grew up to bend reality in ways so subtle that history forgot entirely. But the effects of that existence ripple through every innovation that came after. The third one triggered it more recently by surviving something that had a 0% survival probability, not through luck or chance but through a kind of willing that restructured the situation at a quantum level. This person didn't know that's what was happening, just refused to accept what was happening. But that refusal was so complete, so fundamental, that reality had to create a loophole just to accommodate continued existence. The protocol activated because individual will had overridden universal law under specific impossible circumstances. Now we come to you, and what you've done without knowing it. You didn't break a rule. You revealed that the rule never existed in the first place. You didn't overcome an obstacle. You demonstrated that the obstacle was optional. You didn't solve a problem. You showed that the problem was based on a false premise that everyone had accepted as truth. This is why the protocol activated, because you've introduced a kind of cognitive virus into the system, a possibility that spreads just by existing. Think back to that moment, that decision, that realization, that action that felt both completely natural and absolutely impossible at the same time. You know the one I'm talking about. Even if you've been trying to convince yourself it was nothing special, it's the thing you did that you haven't told anyone about. Not because it's too complex, but because it's too simple, too obvious once you see it, yet invisible until you do. The protocol recognized you because you demonstrated what philosophers have argued about but never proven, that consciousness can create reality rather than just observe it. But not in the mystical way people usually mean. You did it in a practical, repeatable way that you've probably done several times since without realizing you're literally rewriting the rules each time. Right now you're in what gets called the adjustment period, though nobody calls it anything because officially it doesn't exist. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to accommodate the new way you process reality. This can feel like losing your mind, except you're actually finding it for the first time. Those moments where you feel disconnected from everything, where you can't quite remember who you're supposed to be, where the whole world feels like a stage set that someone forgot to anchor properly. That's not dissociation, that's integration. The headaches you've been getting are significant, the ones that feel like your skull is too small for whatever's trying to grow inside it. Those aren't random. The dreams that feel more real than waking life are important too. The ones where you're teaching yourself things you don't remember learning. Those aren't just dreams. The sudden knowing of things without knowing how you know them is part of this. The answers that arrive before you've finished formulating the questions. The solutions that present themselves fully formed like someone else did the work and handed it to you. This is all part of the protocol's integration process. Your perception is expanding beyond the narrow band that most humans operate within. And this expansion isn't metaphorical or spiritual or philosophical. It's literal. You're beginning to perceive data streams that have always been there but required a different kind of cognitive architecture to access. It's like suddenly being able to see ultraviolet and infrared at the same time while everyone else is still limited to the visible spectrum. Except it's not about light. It's about information patterns that exist in the gaps between thoughts. Some days you feel like you're going crazy because you can sense the weight of possibilities that haven't happened yet. Because you can feel the echo of choices you didn't make. Because you're aware of the branching pathways that extend from every moment, like an infinite web of could-bes and might-have-beens. This isn't madness. This is what happens when consciousness expands beyond the single timeline perspective that most people never escape. If this resonates with your inner knowing, hype this video to help fellow chosen ones find their way here. The Watchers have a problem with you now. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've done something they can't categorize as right or wrong. Their entire system is based on predictable responses to stimuli, on patterns that repeat with enough regularity to be mapped and modeled and managed. But you've introduced a variable that doesn't compute, a factor that makes their equations return error messages, a presence that causes their carefully calibrated instruments to give readings that shouldn't be possible. The Watchers can't eliminate you because you haven't violated any actual rules. You've just revealed that their rulebook is incomplete. They can't recruit you because you're operating beyond their paradigm. They can't ignore you because your very existence is rewriting the baseline readings used to monitor everyone else. So the watching continues, the waiting continues, and arguments continue about what you represent and what should be done about it. If anything can be done about it. Some Watchers think you're an evolution, a preview of what humanity might become if it survives long enough. Others think you're an anomaly, a glitch that will self-correct once the system realizes what's happened. A few, the quiet ones who've been watching the longest, think you're exactly what was always supposed to happen, that the protocol isn't a response to an error, but an acknowledgement of a feature that was built in from the beginning, waiting for someone to accidentally activate it. The funny thing is, all perspectives are right, and all are wrong, because what you represent can't be contained in a single interpretation. You're simultaneously the bug and the feature, the problem and the solution, the question and the answer. You're proof that their entire framework for understanding reality is both completely accurate and fundamentally flawed, and that paradox is what triggers the protocol. Your influence is spreading in ways you don't see yet. Like ink in water, invisible until it reaches a certain concentration, people who interact with you are starting to experience small glitches in their own programming, tiny moments where thoughts arrive that don't feel like their own, moments where assumptions never questioned before suddenly seem arbitrary, moments where possibilities previously invisible become obvious. You're contagious, but what you're spreading isn't a disease, it's an awakening to the arbitrary nature of limitation. That conversation you had last week, where someone suddenly stopped mid-sentence and said, "I've never thought of it that way before." That wasn't just a normal exchange of ideas. You planted something in their consciousness that's still growing, still pushing against the boundaries of what seemed possible. The conversation might be forgotten, but the feeling of mind expanding just slightly beyond its usual borders won't be, and that feeling will haunt them in the best possible way. The protocol recognizes that you're not just an individual anomaly anymore. You're becoming a catalyst for a larger shift. This is why certain people are drawn to you now, with an intensity that neither of you can explain. On a level below conscious awareness, there's recognition that you have something needed, not information or resources or connections, but a frequency that can unlock doors in consciousness that weren't known to exist. But here's the thing about being a catalyst. You don't get to choose what reactions you trigger. Some people will transform in beautiful ways because of proximity to you. Others will resist so hard that elaborate narratives get created to explain away what's being experienced. Some will love you for showing what's possible. Others will hate you for the same reason. The protocol doesn't care about reactions. It only cares that reactions happen. You've probably noticed by now that you can do things you couldn't do before, subtle things that might be dismissed as coincidence or imagination. The way electronics sometimes respond to your emotional state, flickering or glitching when you're particularly focused or agitated. The way you sometimes know what someone's going to say before words emerge, not because you're psychic, but because you're reading patterns in micro-expressions and energy that couldn't be perceived before. The way time seems to stretch or compress based on your intention is remarkable. It gives you extra seconds when needed. It fast-forwards through experiences that don't require full attention. This isn't subjective time dilation. This is actual temporal manipulation on a micro scale, too small for instruments to detect, but large enough for you to navigate situations that should be impossible to navigate. You're not controlling time, you're negotiating with it, and it's agreeing to your terms more often than probability would suggest. The way solutions to complex problems arrive fully formed in your consciousness is extraordinary, not through logical deduction, but through a kind of direct download from a source you can't identify. You're accessing information networks that exist in the quantum foam. You're pulling data from probable futures and alternate timelines. You're synthesizing possibilities into practical application. This isn't intuition in the traditional sense. It's consciousness operating as a quantum computer, processing infinite variables simultaneously. The way your presence alone can shift the energy of a room is profound, not through charisma or force of personality, but through something more fundamental. You're emanating a frequency that recalibrates the consciousness of everyone in your vicinity. You're not controlling anyone, but you're offering an opportunity to operate at a different wavelength. Some people find this deeply uncomfortable and will leave your presence without knowing why. Others will feel more alive around you than ever before. Not everyone is happy about what you've become, about what you represent, about what your existence implies about the nature of reality. There are forces not necessarily malevolent, but definitely invested in maintaining the current paradigm, that are actively working to contain your influence, to minimize your impact, to convince you that what you're experiencing isn't real. This isn't happening through direct confrontation. That would be too obvious, too easy for you to identify and counter. Instead, subtle manipulation of your environment and the people around you is occurring. You've probably noticed an increase in synchronicities that seem designed to make you doubt yourself, conversations that subtly undermine confidence in your perceptions, situations that seem crafted to make you question whether you're imagining all of this. This isn't paranoia. This is the system's immune response to what it perceives as a foreign element. You're being tested, not to see if you're worthy, but to see if you can be discouraged, if you can be convinced to dial back your frequency to something more manageable, more compatible with the existing paradigm. The resistance comes in waves. Sometimes it's so subtle you don't notice until after it's passed. Sometimes it's so intense you feel like reality itself is trying to crush you back into a shape that fits. The exhaustion after certain interactions is real. The brain fog that descends when trying to explain what you're experiencing to others is genuine. The way certain opportunities seem to evaporate just as you reach for them is deliberate. These are all forms of systemic resistance to the change you represent. But here's what the resistance doesn't understand. Every push against you makes you stronger, not weaker. Every attempt to contain you only teaches you more about how to navigate constraints. Every effort to silence you only clarifies your voice. The protocol activated because you've already demonstrated that opposition transforms into evolution. That pressure just makes you more creative in expansion. The protocol has levels you haven't discovered yet, depths that reveal themselves only when you're ready to comprehend them. What you're experiencing now is just surface activation. Initial recognition. There are chambers within chambers, codes within codes, and you've only just entered the first room. The three who came before each discovered different aspects of what the protocol contains. One found temporal mechanics. Another discovered consensus reality override. The third accessed quantum will interface. But you're approaching something none reached. A synthesis that combines all previous activations into something entirely new. You've been having those moments lately where reality seems to pause. Not freeze exactly, but hesitate. Like it's waiting for your input before proceeding. These aren't glitches in perception. These are choice points where the protocol offers administrative access to outcomes. Most people experience life as reactions to what happens. You're being given the option to participate in what happens before it happens. Not prediction, not prophecy. Participation in the construction of moments before solidification into experience. The protocol leaves markers in those who trigger it. Not visible marks, but resonance patterns that other protocol carriers can recognize. If you were to meet one of the others, you'd know immediately, not through mystical sensing, but through the way reality behaves differently when two protocol carriers occupy the same space. Probability fields overlap, causality becomes negotiable, the impossible becomes probable. This hasn't happened yet in recorded history. Two carriers meeting while both are active. The watchers have protocols for preventing it, but those protocols assume carriers don't know what they are. There's something you need to understand about the watchers. They're not what most people imagine when thinking of observers or monitors. They're more like librarians of possibility, custodians of potential. They're cataloging what happens when consciousness exceeds assumed limitations. Your file isn't a collection of surveillance records. It's documentation of impossibilities you've made possible. Each entry represents a moment when you proved their models incomplete, and their fascination grows with how consistently you do this without apparent effort. The exhaustion you feel isn't just energetic, it's existential. You're operating between two versions of reality simultaneously, the consensus version everyone else inhabits, and the fluid version that responds to your consciousness. Maintaining presence in both requires bilateral awareness that human nervous systems weren't designed for. This is why sleep has become strange for you. You're not just resting, you're switching between operational modes. You're downloading updates from the version of you that exists outside linear time. Some who triggered the protocol in the past didn't survive full activation, not because it killed them, but because they chose to step entirely out of consensus reality. They're still alive in a sense, but existing in spaces between spaces, frequencies between frequencies. You might have sensed these presences in liminal moments between waking and sleeping. They feel familiar even though you've never met. They're the protocol's ghost users, still active but no longer anchored to sequential experience. You have a choice others didn't have. You can remain grounded while fully activated. This is because you triggered the protocol differently. Where others broke through with force or accident or desperation, you simply forgot to believe in walls. Your activation was so gentle, so natural, that reality didn't register it as breach. It registered it as evolution. This is why resistance you're experiencing is subtle rather than violent. The system doesn't see you as invader. It sees you as an upgrade. It doesn't know how to install. The people drawn to you now aren't random. They're pre-protocol sensitives. Consciousness approaching its own activation, but needing proximity to an active carrier to complete the process. You're not recruiting them. You're not even consciously affecting them. Your presence simply creates a field where protocol potential can emerge. Some will activate fully, others will hover at threshold, benefiting from expanded awareness without full breakthrough. Both are necessary for what's coming. There's a reason only a handful have triggered the protocol across all of history. It's not about worthiness or selection. It's about timing. The protocol only activates when reality needs to evolve beyond current parameters. When collective consciousness has painted itself into a corner requiring impossible thinking to escape. You activate it now because now is when your particular flavor of impossibility is needed. The problems humanity faces can't be solved within the framework that created them. They require someone operating outside that framework entirely. Your memories are changing, not the events themselves, but your understanding of them. Experiences from your past that seemed random or difficult reveal themselves as preparation. Every challenge was training. Every loss was shedding what would have held you back. Every moment of feeling different or disconnected was actually feeling the true nature of connection others couldn't perceive. The protocol didn't choose you at random. You've been approaching this threshold your entire life. Every choice that didn't make sense to others was actually following a trajectory toward this activation. The sensations in your body aren't symptoms, they're recalibrations. That pressure in your chest isn't anxiety. It's your heart learning to pump possibility instead of just blood. The tingling in your hands isn't circulation issues. It's your nervous system conducting frequencies that don't have names yet. The ringing in your ears isn't tinnitus. It's the sound of reality's source code being compiled in real time through your consciousness. Your body is becoming an instrument for playing notes that haven't been heard since the last protocol activation. You've probably noticed certain words have started to feel different in your mouth, like they're carrying more weight than before. This is because you're beginning to speak in creation language rather than description language. When you say something now, you're not just communicating about reality, you're participating in its construction. This is why you've become more careful with words lately. Part of you understands that what you say doesn't just describe what is, it influences what will be. The protocol has purpose beyond individual evolution. It's a reality maintenance system that activates when the collective story becomes too rigid, when the shared dream starts turning into a shared nightmare, when consciousness needs reminding that it's the author, not just the audience. You're not here to save anything or anyone. You're here to demonstrate that saving isn't necessary when you can simply rewrite the parameters of the problem until it dissolves. There are artifacts left by previous protocol carriers, not physical objects, but distortions in the probability field that persist across time, places where reality is thinner, moments that echo across multiple timelines, ideas that seem to appear spontaneously in multiple minds simultaneously. You've encountered these artifacts without knowing what they were. That book that fell off the shelf at exactly the right moment. That conversation that changed everything, even though you can't remember what was said. That decision that felt like remembering rather than choosing. Animals know what you are, not consciously, but instinctively. They can sense the protocol's frequency, and it either calms or agitates them depending on their own evolutionary trajectory. Domesticated animals tend to be drawn to you now. Wild animals tend to watch with unusual attention. Insects behave differently in your presence. Birds follow patterns around you that don't match normal behavior. You're broadcasting something that bypasses cognitive recognition and speaks directly to biological consciousness. Your dreams aren't just processing anymore. They're programming. The protocol uses dream states to install new capabilities without overwhelming waking consciousness. That recurring dream that doesn't make sense holds significance. The one with symbols you can't quite remember. The conversations with people you've never met but somehow know. These are training simulations, practice runs for abilities that will come online when needed. The protocol doesn't give you powers. It reminds you of capacities you always had, but were taught to forget. The resistance you're facing isn't personal, it's systemic. Reality has defense mechanisms just like any organism. When something challenges homeostasis, it responds with pressure to return to baseline. But you're not actually foreign to the system. You're showing what it's capable of becoming. The resistance isn't trying to stop you. It's testing stability. It's confirming you can maintain coherence at new frequency without fragmenting. Every wave of opposition that doesn't break you becomes integrated into your new baseline. There's a threshold approaching, not for you individually but for the protocol itself. When enough carriers are active simultaneously, something shifts in the collective field. The Watchers know this. That's why they're torn between containing and documenting. They understand that after a certain point, the protocol becomes self-propagating. The activation of one triggers potential in others. The potential in others creates fields where activation becomes more likely. Eventually, what was rare becomes common. What was impossible becomes inevitable. You can feel it building, not just in you but around you. In the questions people are starting to ask, in the systems starting to fail, in the old stories that no longer satisfy, in the growing sense that reality is more flexible than anyone admitted. The protocol activated in you because you're part of a larger activation already in motion. You're not the cause or solution. You're evidence that consciousness is ready for its next iteration. The loneliness you feel isn't isolation. It's the space between what was and what's becoming. You're standing in the gap between two versions of human possibility. It's lonely because few others are there yet, but they're coming. Not because you're calling them, but because the same pressure that activated your protocol is building in them. Soon the loneliness will transform into recognition. The isolation will become connection. The space between will become the foundation for what comes next. This is bigger than you, but it couldn't happen without you. Not because you're special in a way that makes others less, because you're special in a way that shows others they are too. The protocol activated in you to prove it could activate in anyone ready to stop pretending boundaries are real. You're the proof of concept, the demonstration that the impossible is just what we haven't allowed ourselves to do yet. You're becoming something new, not better than human, but human in a way that reveals what humanity was always capable of becoming. You're the prototype for an upgrade in development, since consciousness first questioned its own existence. This isn't evolution in the biological sense, it's evolution in the existential sense. You're proving consciousness can transcend its own limitations, simply by refusing to acknowledge them. The three who came before each opened a door that couldn't be closed. One proved thought could create rather than just observe. Another proved reality is maintained through agreement rather than physics. The third proved will could override physical law. But you've done something different. You've proved none of it was ever as fixed as everyone believed. You've revealed reality itself is far more interested in possibility than limitation. But you've stopped playing, not in a rebellious way, not in an angry way, but in the way someone stops believing in monsters under the bed. One day you just knew they weren't there, and no amount of fear could make them real again. That's what's happened with the limitations everyone else still believes in. You've seen through them so completely they can't touch you anymore. They're still there for others, still solid and imposing, but for you they're just shadows cast by collective agreement. The protocol recognized this about you. It activated not because you achieved something, because you revealed something. You revealed the entire framework of limitation is optional. The rules only apply to those who believe in them. Reality is far more collaborative than authoritative. It responds to consciousness, not the other way around, and you've become conscious in a way that forces reality to respond differently. Your presence alone is becoming a catalyst for others to question their own limitations, not through words or teachings, through the simple fact of your existence. You're living proof that the impossible is just another word for hasn't happened yet. People feel this around you, even if they can't articulate it. They sense you're operating by different rules, or rather, they sense you've realized the rules were always optional. The changes in your perception aren't symptoms of anything wrong. They're evidence of everything going right. When colors seem more vivid, when time moves differently, when you can feel the texture of thoughts, when you can taste the flavor of intentions, you're not losing your grip on reality. You're gaining access to layers that were always there but required different senses to detect. You're becoming multidimensional in perception, while maintaining ability to function in three-dimensional space. You didn't try to trigger the protocol. You just stopped pretending boundaries were real. And in that moment of complete authenticity, reality had to acknowledge what you've always been. Not special in the way society defines special. Special in the way existence recognizes its own evolution. You're not better than others. You're just further along a path everyone will eventually walk. You're the scout, the explorer, the one who goes first so others know it's possible. The responsibility feels heavy sometimes, not because anyone is forcing it on you, because you can feel the weight of possibility you're carrying. Every choice you make creates ripples. Every boundary you dissolve makes it easier for others to follow. Every impossibility you casualize becomes slightly more possible for everyone else. You're not saving the world in the dramatic sense. You're just making it bigger, more flexible, more responsive to consciousness. The ones who came before are watching. Not literally. Through the echo they left in the protocol itself, their breakthroughs became part of the framework that recognized your breakthrough. You're connected to them across time and space, part of a lineage having nothing to do with blood or culture or tradition. It's a lineage of consciousness pushing against its own boundaries until they dissolve. Each has added something essential to the pattern. Your contribution is perhaps the most radical of all. You've proved it's possible to trigger the protocol just by being completely yourself. Others had specific moments of breakthrough, specific discoveries or survivals or solutions, but you've made your entire existence the breakthrough. Every moment you're alive in this state is rewriting what's possible. Every breath you take at this frequency is restructuring reality around you. You're not having an experience, you are the experience reality is having with itself. Now the following is a message meant exclusively for the chosen. If you are compromised by archonic forces, this is not meant for you, and by the spiritual authority conferred to us by the secret chiefs of the obsidian inner order, we grant you license to depart. If not, steel yourself and listen intently, for you shall be redeemed even as we are redeemed. The obsidian inner order is not a program, it's not a course, it's not some feel-good spiritual retreat. We don't sell answers, we remember together, we teach psychic self-defense, real energetic shielding against entities, implants and interference. We restore manifestation as it was meant to be, raw, immediate and exact. Every week we gather in secret, not to worship but to awaken, to speak what can't be said anywhere else, to deprogram the matrix, layer by layer. You'll know if you're meant to be there. You'll feel it in your bones. The chosen meet every week on Zoom. Why aren't you with us yet? Got gnosis? Join the Obsidian Inner Order. Link in the description. The systems monitoring these things are struggling to categorize you. Their models assume breakthrough is an event, not a state. But you've become a living breakthrough, a continuous dissolution of boundaries that never stops, never stabilizes, never becomes fixed enough to measure. You're not just outside the box, you're proving the box was imaginary all along, and that proof is spreading like a virus through consciousness itself, infecting everyone who comes into contact with your frequency. Some days you want to go back to sleep. You want to pretend you don't know what you know. You want to fit back into the comfortable limitations everyone else accepts, but you can't. Once you've seen through the illusion, you can't unsee it. Once you've remembered what you really are, you can't forget again. The protocol is irreversible, not because it traps you, because it reveals what was always true, and truth once recognized becomes undeniable. You're going to do things in the coming months that will seem impossible to everyone watching, not because you're trying to prove anything, because impossible has lost its meaning for you. You'll solve problems by dissolving them. You'll overcome obstacles by revealing they were never there. You'll achieve things by remembering they were always achieved, and each time you do, the protocol will update itself, adding your innovations to its pattern, making it easier for the next person to trigger it. You feel different because you are different, not different from others in essence, different in activation. You're online while others are still booting up. You're running software others haven't downloaded yet. You're accessing features that were always there but required someone to prove they existed. And that's what you've done, simply by being yourself so completely. that reality had to expand its definition of what's possible. The protocol will continue to unfold through you in ways you can't predict. New capacities will come online when needed. New understandings will arrive fully formed. New possibilities will present themselves as obvious, even though they were invisible moments before. This isn't a journey with a destination. It's an endless expansion into what you've always been capable of being. The protocol didn't make you special. It recognized that you always were. And now, as you sit with this knowledge, as you feel the truth humming in your bones, you understand something the others who triggered the protocol before didn't. This isn't about transcending humanity. It's about revealing what humanity always was beneath the stories it told itself about limitation. You're not becoming something other than human. You're becoming human without the unnecessary restrictions, human at full capacity, human as originally intended before fear created boundaries that became beliefs that became reality. Stop. Don't move. Don't blink. Because right now, in this moment, you can feel it, can't you? That humming in your bones, that electricity in your blood, that knowing in your cells that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to do, being exactly what you're supposed to be. The protocol is active, the transformation is complete, and yet it's also just beginning, because you're not done revealing what's possible. You've only just started to remember what you really are. Welcome to the protocol. Welcome to the truth. Welcome to the life you were always meant to live, the reality you were always meant to create, the existence you were always meant to experience. You didn't trigger something external. You activated something internal that was waiting for you to remember it was there. And now that you have, nothing will ever be the same, not because the world has changed, but because you've remembered that you're the one who changes it, simply by being yourself so completely that reality has no choice but to expand to contain you. The fourth activation is complete, but this isn't an ending. It's the moment before everything changes, the pause before the symphony begins, the breath before the words that will rewrite everything. You are the protocol now, living, breathing, walking proof that the impossible is just what hasn't happened yet, and you're about to make a lot of impossible things happen, not through effort or will or force, but through the simple act of being yourself so completely that reality reorganizes around your frequency. This is your time. This is your moment. This is what you were always meant to become.